The Nigerian Stock Exchange continues to highlight the importance of sustainable business practices in delivering value and supporting economic growth. But sustainability reporting is not part of the corporate strategies of most companies in Nigeria. So why is it important to imbibe this culture? The West Africa lead climate change and sustainability services at Ernst & Young, Joseph Owolabi, joins me to shed more light on this. A good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Well, the Nigerian Stock Exchange recently released its 2015 sustainability report. Now, as the West Africa lead and climate change sustainability services at Ernst & Young, you worked with the NSC on this report. Could you give us like an executive summary of it?
It's good to know that the Nigerian Stock Exchange been working with other stock exchanges across the world. There's a Sustainable Exchanges Initiative, which they joined about 2-3 years ago. And the idea is to take the lead. So regulators, other stakeholders should begin to drive this process of sustainability. So the exchange has put in some corporate governance initiative. And one of those things is to ensure that they also publish their own sustainability report so that other companies can take the initiative from there.
So just give us a fair understanding of what sustainability reporting is.
Okay, to the layman, when you say sustainability report, it talks about how do we meet the need of this generation without compromising the need of future generations. So when it comes to consuming non-renewable energy, when it comes to consuming natural resources like water, air, trees and all of that, how do we ensure that we do not starve the planet of these resources for future generations? So a lot of attention has been placed on environmental issues. How do we care about the environment? Pollution is becoming key. Climate change issues are becoming the order of the day globally. In December, you're probably aware, about 195 heads of states gathered in Paris to set the tone. They made commitment to curb climate change and global temperatures to about 2 degrees Celsius. So there's a lot of activity happening in this space. Investors, civil society, employees, suppliers, regulators are all asking questions. They're saying, don't just worry about the financial numbers, profits, and all of that. We want to know how you care about your people, how you care about the communities where your businesses are operating at, and what have you. So these issues are becoming front-born when it comes to risk assessment. If you don't care about how you treat the communities where you operate, it could lead to you not having the social license to even operate in the first place. So it's very, very important. Companies are now producing other reports outside of their annual reports.
So while you're producing your financial report, for instance, you must have side by side with it a sustainability report to show not just your investors, but other companies as well, what exactly you're doing in terms of sustaining the environment in which you operate.
True. Interestingly, it's become the norm. In the last 20 years, you'll find that either you include this report as part of your annual report, or you set aside a separate report that talks about things like management disclosures, like you said, sustainability reporting, corporate governance issues, how you've ensured that the business can continue to exist for a long time.
In your interactions with shareholders, have you ever gotten this impression that they care very much about sustainability reports for a particular company that they own shares, or they are more focused on how the financial reporting is?
So if you cast your mind back to the 1960s, so it was just about the industrial age and all of that. It was about the financial statement. You want to know the assets you have in your books. You want to be sure the liabilities are not too much, gearing ratios, what have you.
And then the dividends, of course.
And the dividends. Obviously, you want to see profit. But coming into the 1980s, people started to ask questions. There's been a lot of recession and market decline. People started to ask questions about corporate governance. What's happening? Are we sure the numbers are even right? What's the thinking going into the numbers? So companies have to show things around their strategy. What's our purpose? Why are we doing this? So that became more important. Going into the 1980s down to the 2000s, you discover, like I like to say, that about 60 to 80% of the valuation of a company does not even exist in the physical assets. So it exists in the intangibles, things you cannot see, how consumers feel about that particular company. Look at Apple, Google, most of Alibaba, Uber. They don't have physical assets. Okay, so it's about customer perception, about your impact on the environment. So some of these leading global Fortune 500 companies are investing seriously in climate change. Microsoft uses about 80% of its electricity on renewable energy. alone. Okay, Apple, Facebook, they're all taking initiatives. Unilever and some of these innovative companies are taking that step forward. So it's becoming the order of the day. Not just investors, like you rightly mentioned. Investors are clamoring for it. A key index that is usually reviewed, apart from your financial statements, are your ESG information, your environmental, social, and governance issues. Investors, private equity, foreign direct investments, all look at this area because it is core at the heart of the business in the new millennium.
But then, for the companies listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, how many of them actually report on the ECGs?
So, a few of them. You would find that in terms of sustainability, the approach globally has been more of principles-based. Outside of the US, where you have rules-based, the US has what they call Sustainability Accounting Standards Board and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which sets laws. You remember the Volkswagen issue? So they contravene the law of the EPA. So usually across the world, Europe, all of that, you would not typically find a rules-based. It's more around principles-based, comply or explain. So in the EU, there's a EU directive to disclose non-financial information. South Africa has been leading in that space. The King Code 123 specifies what companies should do, but it also gives them that leeway. If you're not doing that, you explain. In Nigeria, we've been working with the stock exchange in the last 2 years with GRI. GRI is a global reporting initiative to set the tone, to encourage companies that this is the order of the day. You want to be a global company, you have footprints across Africa, you have foreign direct investments, then you can't ignore issues that are at the core of the existence of your organization. So you find out that the greatest risk to a company is not just the loans you have. You know, there's so much about loans recently, AMCON loans, all of that. It's your reputational risk. So Adidas, Volkswagen, we've talked about it, MTN, Shell, some of these companies have had to be on the other side, on the extreme side, and they've suffered from negative criticism that could come from activists and also the social media.
But that's basically on a global scale. But here in Nigeria, do we have such activism actually, chasing them to make sure that, you bring out a sustainability report just so we have an idea of what it is that we're dealing with?
Okay, again, like I mentioned, it's going to come from, so we did a research at the last GRI conference, and it looked at what are the drivers for sustainability reporting. You'll still find out about 32% of that goes to regulatory induced. So in those areas where there are laws that encourage that, you find out about overwhelming 56% of respondents states that where you have a better or strong corporate leadership, that would encourage that. And where you also have industries or countries where there is demand, where people start to clamor. So when individuals, customers start to say, oh, how did you manufacture this? This is worth $10. But did you use energy from renewable or non-renewable sources? How much damage have you done to the environment? When people start clamoring for it, you begin to see all of that change. But in Nigeria, you have companies already leading. In terms of companies that have found themselves to suffer, there are fines here and there. Shell has not found it easy in Nigeria. Of the Ogoni issues, of those oil spill sanctions and huge fines you would have to pay. MTN recently, from customer identification and all of that issues, have to deal with that huge, close to 1.4 trillion naira fine that they're still trying to sort out. So, like I said, the greatest risk for an organization is that risk you have to deal with. Recently, too, apart from Shell and MTN, you find that also in the last few years, Mobil has said that climate change was not real. So they ignored it, and it was documented in their papers. When it became a public issue, social media, the trend started, there was adverse publicity, and this affects your share value directly. Studies have shown that, with the MTN sanction, immediately in a matter of days, over 30% reduction in share price. With Volkswagen, within 2 weeks, 50% plummeting of the share price from the market's eye that they had in March. And analysts from JP Morgan estimates that Volkswagen issue, which they had with the EPA, will cost them over $45 billion. So when it comes to real monetary value, which CEOs want to know, there's that link now between non-financial information, which you find in your sustainability, and how it connects directly to the financial information that we are all used to.
Across board, we have companies that emit some form of emission or the other.
Yeah.
For Volkswagen, we knew it was a result of gas emissions. Okay, but coming back home, the oil spill, and that we have Shell heavily fined for, and the telecommunications because they failed to register some lines. But then, do you think that we have enough punitive measures being put in place to ensure that companies stick to what they know best and protect the environment? For instance, laws and regulation, how much do you think has been done?
So the challenge you find in developing countries, not just Nigeria, is that when it comes to policy formation, it's top-down. So we expect the federal government to drive it. The state government is not doing so much, the local governments. But if you follow countries like the United States, you see that it's a multi-stakeholder involvement. So you need to have involvement from the local government, from the state government. What's Lagos State doing? Are you encouraging companies to take advantage of the huge water resources to generate power? What are you doing in the north, northeast? Are you giving incentives? So you need to have that multi-stakeholder involvement. Punitive measures are good, but what we've seen is that you need to tell the CEO what's in need for them, because they're also accountable to shareholders. They need to declare huge returns.
What's the need for them? Sorry to cut you. What's the need for them to have sustainable
practices and all of that? Okay. And that's what we've been trying to do. The recent seminar which we had at the stock exchange, EY, Nigerian Stock Exchange, and GRI came together to have that seminar. We looked at beyond reporting. So it's good enough to say, oh, reports, be good to the environment, but how do you engage a CEO who has that, conflict of interest? Yeah, I want to protect the environment, but I also have to declare, huge returns. So sustainability has evolved beyond just reporting. There are issues around shared value. Can we identify a sweet spot where we address social issues, but the company also makes some amount of money from that? And a number of companies are already doing that. So it's easier to get more buy-in of CEO and business people when you tell them that, why don't you address it's a power issue in Nigeria? Do you know that rather than flare gas, you could change your strategy and begin to build infrastructure, get money from donor agencies globally that are interested in addressing power issues in Africa, use those funds to build infrastructure which is deficient, and you're able to channel those gas to a gas turbine that would generate power for the people. So you make money. So we in our engagement with CEOs and business people, we don't just restrict it to reporting, because there's huge cost, burden from reporting. You have to do IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standard. You have to do code of corporate governance, show that your board is effective and all of that. So it's huge cost to the organization. So when you tell them they should do another report, they don't want to hear that. But when you show them what's in it for them, and that's what we're doing, we're showing them impact investing. We're showing them topics like shared value. We're showing them responsible investing. And when they see that we can actually generate returns, which is what we want to do, which is what our shareholders want to do, by addressing areas where there are social need.
But then, you've talked about engaging the CEOs and other people who have shared, interests. What about the other community, the others? Talking about the capital market community, for instance. Yes, you've done very actively, engaging with the Nigerian Stock Exchange. But then there's still others in the capital market community that need to understand the reason why, when we're talking to an investor, for instance, and we're talking about the financial report of a particular company, we should be encouraging them to also look at the sustainability report as well.
For the investor community and the dealers and all of that, you don't even need to talk to them. So it's now the norm. So investors globally, and Nigeria is a hub for foreign direct investment. Over the last 20 years or so, we'll probably be between 1 and 5 in terms of ideal destination for funds from across the globe. So it's already a metrics anybody would review. So you find that for forward-thinking organizations, they're already doing that, the likes of a number of the banks. And we already have social codes, I'd like to mention. The Nigerian banking industry have something called Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which the central bank, all of the deposit money banks, discount houses, and development banks have to adhere to. And they've started producing this report. Some of them have audits done on them already. So you have all of that happening in Nigeria. You'll find that for the investor community, the push would come from the foreign direct investors, the PE firms, who would challenge what they have been presenting. I say we need to see how you impact on the environment and how you've been able to address the issues of this impact.
So in the very short term, do you expect to see more companies catching on to this form of reporting?
Yeah, it's now or never. Global leaders, like I mentioned, 195 leaders have put their foot out towards this. You find corporate champions, CEOs, charismatic leaders also showing support for the climate change. The Nigerian Ministry of Environment, CBN, the Stock Exchange, SEC, everybody coming together. We need to have civil society, people like yourself and me going out there and talking to people about giving them awareness such that it forms the basis of their purchasing decisions also. And this would help drive this.
Joseph Owolabi, thank you so much for coming
on
the program.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.